Hello, this is Dr. Feast Price, and I'd like to talk with you about stages of development in the group counseling process. In the previous set of slides, we discussed Yalom, who is known as the godfather of group therapy. I think it's also important not only to understand Yalom's perspectives regarding groups, how groups are formulated, and how they develop, but I also wanted to expand your knowledge base by presenting other perspectives of group therapy and its stages of development as well. And so I'd like to start by talking about the stages of group, which begins with the pre-group stage. And in the pre-group stage of group therapy, it entails the group formation and designing, attracting members, screening and selecting, and orientation. In the group formation and designing, it's important that the group leaders identify the purpose of the group, the nature of the group, the particular voids that will be met in the group, the number of sessions that the group will meet, and all of the particulars associated with the various stages of the group. We recognize that through managed care, usually insurance companies will pay for a limited number of groups. It might be 8 groups, it might be 10 groups, but based upon the number of groups that are going to be paid for by an insurance company, it helps to dictate the number of sessions that you'll have. And so when you know that you will only have a designated number of sessions, it helps you to formulate how you will develop the groups, which information will be covered, and what parts of the group, whether it'll be the first group meeting, the second group meeting, or any subsequent group meetings. You also are discussing the information that'll discuss how the groups will evolve and how the information that's relevant to the group will be presented as participants matriculate from the first group meeting up until the second, third, fourth, and subsequent meetings. There are issues related to attracting members. Who are the members you're wanting to attract to the group? You want to consider whether the groups will be heterogeneous versus homogeneous, whether it'll be gender specific, whether it'll be an open group or closed group. So you're also considering who are the members, who are the key members that would most benefit from the kinds of group therapy that you're developing. You might recognize that while, for example, anger management might be a topic that is important for both males and females, because of the way in which females and males are socialized, you might want to have gender separate groups. And so you want to be careful and clearly think about who are the group members that you are particularly interested in as it relates to the group that you're developing. Screening and selecting is really important because even though members may say that they're interested in your group because you're offering a particular group that's consistent with their needs, once you screen the group members, you might realize that not every person that is interested in the group is best suited for your group. For example, you might come to realize that some individuals would be best suited for individual therapy because of the complexity of their issues and their emotional state. Group therapy may not be the ideal setting for the individual, but you're always thinking of if the person isn't right for your group, you definitely want to be ethical by referring them to adequate resources to help meet their needs. So screening is a very important part of the group, not only to make sure that the person that you're identifying for your group is best suited, but you want to make sure that in selecting participants for the group that they understand what the group process entails. What does it mean to be a participant in a group? The fact that they are sharing personal and relevant information with persons with whom they do not know, understanding the stages of the group process, the importance of disclosure, the fact that members of the group are also sharing relevant information role playing, interacting, and how groups are a part of a microcosm of society, which makes it very important. And so screening and selection is very important. It has a lot to do with the effectiveness of your group. It can determine the extent to which you'll have people that are dropping out versus persons that are getting the full benefit of what your group has to offer. So you want to always carefully think about the purpose of your group, the targeted audience. You want to screen the members. You want to carefully select the members because the ideal size of a group is 8 to 10 members. And so you're always wanting to ensure that you have the appropriate number of participants that are best suited for the group. During the pre-group stage of the process, you also want to orient people to what to expect in the group process. You want to tell them who you are, what your role and function is, what the group entails, how many sessions, what are the different stages. You also want to make sure that they're aware of the discomforts that might exist at the beginning of the group, but also emphasize the benefits of a therapeutic group process, cohesion that typically occurs as the group evolves, relationships that are established. So you want to, in the orientation phase of the pre-group stage, you want to make sure that group members fully understand the process, what to expect, and to make sure that they don't go into the group process not knowing or understanding what is expected of them and how they will matriculate through the group process. So when we talk about the initial stage, it has to do with orientation and exploration. Orientation is really where the rubber meets the road once groups have coalesced and group members are present. It's really collectively orienting the group members on what to expect in the group process. It involves members meeting each other, sharing information, and understanding the shared purpose for being at the group. And so the initial stage of the group, once you have completed the pre-group stage, is the group actually meeting, whereby members are oriented and there is an exploration associated with why persons are present, what they hope to get out of the group, how the group is similar, and how the group will evolve and progress. There's also the transition stage of the group, and that's teaching members how to work through their concerns. So as issues come up, you're teaching each member how to dissect and understand what the problem is and how to go through the problem resolution stage of the group. For me, because I'm a cognitive behaviorist, I always help participants of the group to understand that their thinking or cognitions impact their behaviors as well as their feelings. And so it's not that certain situations have occurred. It's how people think about those situations, how they in turn feel about them, which ultimately impacts their behavior. And so getting people to understand the connection between thinking and feeling and behaving is ultimately what I strive for in the group context. And so depending on the presenting issues, I often approach the training and teaching members how to discern and work through their issues based upon a cognitive behavioral frame of reference. The working stage is a stage that's recognized as productiveness or productivity. That's when a lot of issues are discussed and working through. It's emotionally latent, but there is cohesion among group members. They're making behavior changes. They're taking what they learn in the group context into their lives outside of the group. So within the working stage, there's usually a lot of role playing. There's a lot of processing of thoughts and feelings associated with it. And through the role playing within the group, they often have assignments of ways of carrying out the information learned in the group into their personal lives. And then through carrying out their behavior in their personal lives, they're able to understand how behaviors and knowledge learned in the group transcend the group. So it's when you're seeing the behavior changes that you're evolving into the final stages of the group process. So within the final stage, there is the learning that the behavior, the newly learned behavior, becomes a way of life. It's also a time where the facilitator begins to terminate the group process. However, termination is not limited to the final stage of the final meeting of the group. I actually begin the termination of the group, or begin to introduce terminating within the working stage. I usually see it as a time of affirming the positive behaviors that I'm witnessing, the positive changes in cognitions and affect, and helping people to understand that as their behaviors are evolving, the group will too be evolving and coming to an end, but instilling confidence in the fact that the group members have what it takes to take what was learned in the group context and incorporate it into their daily lives, which has a ripple effect not only on their lives but the lives of others that they come in contact with. There's the pulling together of loose ends. I also see it as a time of connecting the dots, or giving group a gestalt. And again, what it has a lot to do with is the transference of information from the group context into their daily life. So it's integrating and interpreting the group context or the group experiences, the purpose of the group, what they were there for, what they have benefited from, what I have observed as their group leader, what other group members have observed within them, and seeing how this information of learning and behaving extrapolates to one's daily lives and positively impacting relationships and outcomes in their daily existence. Your book talks about the conceptualization of group. And so what I'd like to do is spend some time talking about the conceptualization of group as it relates to what the information that's in your textbook. But the conceptualization also has a lot to do with what we've already talked about as it relates to the pre-group stage. And the pre-group stage is what has been identified by Corey. However, your textbook relates the group process, especially the early process of group, to the conceptualization of group. And so it's discussed in terms of stages, and the first stage is forming, exploratory or exploration, orientation, and security. And so it's important to first realize that the group context is a fluid process, and that the stages that we are describing here are not discrete and neatly separated into the aspects of real life, but you want to keep in mind that the stages are overlapping and that individuals move fluidly from one stage to another. So as we talk about the different stages of group, just keep in mind that the stages are fluid. Sometimes persons may move through various stages, but find themselves resorting back to earlier stages to become oriented, centered, and grounded as they evolve through the group context. So what do we mean when we talk about stage one in terms of forming? Forming has a lot to do with the initial development of the group, thinking about what the group is for, whether the group will be for particular populations, will it be gender specific, will it be open to other gender groups, will it be specific to certain ages, certain population. So a lot of discussions take place among the group member or group facilitators prior to the group ever beginning. So it's the formulating of the group and understanding what's the purpose of the group, um, and the intended audience of the group. It also has a lot to do with the group structure. One is constantly trying to figure out, will it be an 8-member group? Will it have, um, will it be a closed group or an open group? Whether it will be 8 weeks, 10 weeks, or 12 weeks. So there are a number of critical questions that are being asked in stage 1 of the group process. So basically, stage 1 is characterized by following members' behaviors as well. And so you're also paying attention to how well members are becoming oriented, making sure that they're feeling secure in the group process, helping them to explore why they're there, what they hope to accomplish. And so there's a lot that takes place in the early conceptualization of the group, particularly in stage 1. So from the forming that takes place with the facilitators or group leaders, to exploring with the members why they're there, what they hope to achieve, orienting them to the group process, and ensuring that each of the members that are present feel secure in the group process. Also, I want to just highlight in the forming stage of stage 1, it's making sure that the members are screened and understand why they're there and what they hope to accomplish. So along with stage 1, there is orienting members to the environment, allowing them to test the environment by asking critical questions. There's also identifying boundaries. There's the coming together, seeking acceptance and approval not only from the facilitator but each other, seeking developing commitment to the group process, searching for structure and meaning, building relationships not only with the facilitator of the group but with each other, defining the goals, building a group culture, exploring expectations, learning group functions, seeking one's place in the group, reviewing and defining power, reducing tension, dealing with anxiety, suspicion, and resistance, exploring safety issues, and establishing trust. So these are but a few issues that are most relevant to stage 1 of the group process. In stage 2, which is characterized by storming, transition, conflict, acceptance, orientation, and exploration, group members have issues related to conflict resolution that might go on, because as people are jockeying for positions, feeling uncomfortable, trying to get their equilibrium together, as well as defining their niche in the group, there is a period of storming. You know, there's a lot of irregularities that exist within the group. So it's really a time of influx. But after members are able to go through the storming phase, then it's a phase of transition. I will say that the storming phase is only successful and members only evolve successfully when members, group leaders, are attuned to the environment, what's going on, how members are feeling, and they're able to allay any concerns, helping members to resolve tensions, ensuring that there are no conflicts that exist within the group. So there is storming that takes place at the beginning of the group, but it's really important that the group leader or leaders recognize that this is a very strenuous time for group members, and they work to allay any fears or concerns that might exist among the group members. So once the storming occurs, then persons transition into a fuller understanding of the group process. There are times when there is conflict. We talked about the jockeying for positions when persons are feeling unsure and uncomfortable, and there are some persons that are trying to assume a more leadership role. They might want to speak on behalf of the group, but it's really important that the group leader is aware of what is occurring in stage 2 of the group process, so that as problems occur, they're constantly working through remedying the problems that might exist. So there's conflict resolution, there is acceptance that exists, there's conflict management among the group leaders. Sometimes there may be polarization among members, but if there is polarization, it's important that the group leader recognizes and tries to facilitate the connecting of all group members rather than the splintering that sometimes exists within the group context. So once the member has an understanding of issues related to resistance or dominance, control, power, anxiety, defensiveness, some of the struggles that exist within the group members, issues related to confrontation and conflict, tensions and fears, questioning and dependence, exploration of self as well as group members, then members are able to evolve into a role of acceptance. They're feeling better oriented to the group, and they're then better able to explore issues and concerns that are present for them as well as other group members. Stage 3 of the group process includes norming, action, conflict, responsibility, and transition. And so Yalom noted that conflict that exists as a part of stage 2 and stage 3 in his process is most relevant in stage 3 that is outlined here in your textbook. But Yalom believed that this stage is often viewed as a transitional period during which commitment and productive interaction within the group are more pronounced. So within stage 3, this is a time where cohesiveness exists, and we mentioned before that cohesiveness is the cornerstone of group therapy. And what the therapeutic relationship is in individual therapy, cohesiveness is what is paramount in group therapy. And so it is in stage 3 that cohesiveness is extremely important. There's also a standardization that exists whereby members understand the standards that are established in group, also what some of the expectations are, and ways of relating and interacting. So this is a time of cohesiveness. This is a time where there is more of a solid relationship among group members as well as with the group leader. There's also role clarification and adoption. There's a certain level of intimacy between the group members as well as the group leader with the group members. There is the exploration of problems. Persons are more willing and ready to present problems to the group. There's action exploration as well, whereas the group leader might see that there might be a member that presents differently than they did the week before. They might seem pensive or sad or depressed, and so there's more action or exploration. It's more actively engaging and getting persons to feel comfortable openly sharing and presenting. One of the things I've found in working with groups is that as members are feeling more comfortable with the group, they come more ready, willing, and able to present issues. So rather than the therapist having to draw the information out from the participants, they come more ready and willing to share information, to explore issues of concern. There's also a sense of belonging as well as inclusion among the group members. There's a certain level of solidarity with the group members. There's conflict resolution. There's helping skills that have been established, as well as an enhanced level of risk taking. There's decreased aggression among group members, as well as aggression that might be directed toward the group leader. There's also an increased compromise. People are more likely to compromise with each other, so they are more there's more of a kindred spirit among group members. There's a sense of oneness, wholeness, cohesiveness. There's increased trust. And in having an increased level of trust, persons are more likely to self-disclose. Oftentimes when working with groups, particularly those that are required to come in as a part of court sentencing or reduction of sentence, members always say, when I came in this group, I had vowed that I would be very closed and be mindful of what I disclosed, but as the group evolve and there's the sense of relationship and commitment, oftentimes I hear group members say, I'm so glad that I gave this group a chance and allowed myself to feel comfortable, because they are feeling and sensing the real therapeutic nature of the group process. So conceptualization of groups also evolved with stages 4, 5, and 6. And so with stage 4, there's the performing, termination, cohesiveness, as well as the working that exists within the group context. There is also stage 5, which entails adjourning. There's still cohesiveness. There's the mourning of the group ending, consolidation of information, as well as termination. And then stage 6 involves follow-up and evaluation. So within stages 4 through 6, behaviors that you might often witness are the development of roles, where the roles in the group are more defined. They're channeling their energy toward helping each other and helping themselves resolve their issues or concerns. There's the resolving of issues that persons are dealing with. There's an increased self-disclosure, an increased level of honesty, as well as spontaneity. Persons are far more responsible. There's an integration of the group members. There's interpretation of not only personal issues, but each other's problems. There's an increased behavioral reaffirmation, not only from the clinician to participants, but among participants of the group. There is affirmation for each other. There's an intensification of feelings whereby persons feel more comfortable sharing their feelings. So issues related to sadness, anxiety, as well as dependence is shared among group members. There's preparing for the separation, where persons are feeling a certain level of apprehension and mourning of the group process, but there's also the possibility of resolve that comes with knowing that persons have accomplished the roles or the goals of the group. So once that occurs, then you have the ending of the group with people saying goodbye to each other. And with the ending of groups, I always like for members to go around the room and share what they've learned from the group process, what they've learned from each other. Sometimes they might share what they learned from myself as the leader, but I also take it as an opportunity to share with each of the group member what I have observed in each of them, from the time that they started to the times that they evolved in the group process. I always affirm what they've learned, but I always encourage them to continue to press forward, to never forget what was learned and always to positively um, impact their lives and the lives of others, to take chances, not to be afraid to try new things. And so I think that's what group is for a lot of persons, not only what they take from the group process, but it gives them a willingness to take chances, to try new things, new behaviors, to expand their lives in areas that they may not have explored previously. And so, with the follow up and evaluation, it's always important to evaluate or allow your participants to evaluate the group. There are times when the evaluation takes place at the end of the group, and that's considered more of a summative evaluation. So at the end, you're summarizing and you're evaluating the effectiveness of the group. I think it's important to have more of a formative evaluative process. And with a formative evaluative process, it allows you to constantly look at the group, like at the end of every group meeting, every group you're looking at what was accomplished, what could have been done differently, what worked, what didn't work, what should be enhanced for the subsequent group, who needs to continue to grow and stretch, how should you manage the group different from the previous week. So it's always a time of evaluation, of understanding how to recognize the group and how to change the group process. There's also the follow-up. There are times when groups meet, and typically it could be a designated time period, like 3 months after the group has ended. You might identify a follow-up time period, and some members may choose to follow up. Some members may choose not to participate in the follow-up, but more often than not, persons are given an opportunity to follow up with each other, to understand what the critical issues are, and how they have evolved from the group process. But just know that not everyone will participate in the follow-up. It's usually left up to the discretion of the group members. So just to unpack some of what we've already discussed, which serves as a review, if you will. For stage 1, the forming, exploratory, and orientation, as well as security stage, group planning, there is member recruiting and screening. There's the selection of the group leaders. Sometimes it might be a single leader or co-leaders. We've already talked about the significance associated with carefully selecting co-leaders and ways of effectively working together as leaders. There's the group development process, where it involves the definition of the group, anxiety, issues related to the group, as well as dependence. So as it relates to definition, individuals define where and if they fit in the group, what roles they will take, degrees of acceptance and approval, as well as expectations for themselves and other group members. There's a certain level of anxiety with any group. There is anxiety, and if the truth be told, there is a certain level of anxiety that exists even with the group leaders. The starting of a group is a time of ambiguity, and so there is a certain level of anxiety, not only for group members but group leaders as well. But during this time of anxiety, there is exceptions of risk, perceptions of risk, threat, power, impact, member and leader behaviors and expectations, either real or perceived. So you're asking people, what are you expecting from the group? What are some of your perceptions associated with the group? And as it relates to dependence, it deals with self in relation to others. So exploring issues related to dependence as well. So along with staging, the forming, exploratory, orientation, and security stage, These are among the attributes that are typically seen in this particular stage of group therapy. And I alluded to those before: orienting self to the environment, testing the environment, identifying boundaries, coming together, seeking acceptance as well as approval, developing commitment, searching for structure and meaning, building relationships, defining goals, building a group culture, exploring expectations of the group, learning the functions of the group, seeking one's place in the group, reviewing and defining power, reducing tension, dealing with anxiety, and exploring safety and security issues. So these are among the myriad issues that as a group leader you must be mindful of during the forming, exploratory, orientation, and security phase of stage 1 of the group. So we talked about stage 2 previously, but just to kind of unpack that a little bit more, with regard to stage 2, there is storming, transition, conflict, acceptance, orientation, as well as exploration. And what we know is that during stage 2, it is a time of active group participation. There is behavioral parameters that are outlined. What are the acceptable behaviors of the group process? What is acceptable? What is unacceptable behavior? There is both action as well as reaction. So group members are constantly acting as well as reacting to each other. Oftentimes, when one group member has processed an issue and it's emotionally laden, you're giving that individual an opportunity to process their feelings, discuss their reactions, and so you're also including other members of the group in the process by giving them an opportunity to react to what was heard. How did what you heard impacts your thoughts or feelings or behaviors? What feelings come to mind or thoughts come to mind after hearing what was discussed by the other member of the group? So action and reaction is very important in stage 2 of the group process. There's also a movement from observation to participation. So the group becomes far more action oriented. It's not as exploratory, but it's more action oriented. So along with certain attributes that one would see in stage 2 are conflict resolution, problem management, polarization, resistance, dominance, control, power, anxiety, defensiveness, struggle, confrontation, tension, fear, questioning, and dependency. We've already talked about norming, action, conflict, responsibility, and transition as it relates to stage 3. It also relates to blending and merging of issues, feelings, and concerns among group members. There is productive interaction. Cohesion is paramount. Enhanced commitment by group members. Productive interaction with each other as well as with the group leader. There's a certain level of enmeshment that exists among group members, and what that means is there's a greater sense of relationship, connectedness, camaraderie that exists among group members. And then there are also group-specific activities that might exist. And this particularly occurs outside of the group. You might find that sometimes group members plan activities and events outside of the group. And so what happens in the group really at times transcend what the relationship that exists in the group context. So along with norming, action, conflict, responsibility, and transition are other attributes that are very important to stage 3, and it involves cohesiveness, standardization, role clarification and adoption, intimacy, problem exploration, action exploration, belonging and inclusion, solidarity among group members, conflict resolution, helping skills, enhanced risk taking, decreased aggression. There's an increased level of compromise, as well as trust and self disclosure. So, with stage 4, there is the performing, termination, cohesiveness, as well as performing and working stage. You are more likely to find intensive work among group members, developing new behaviors as well as perspectives, seeing things from other people's points of view. And I believe perspective taking to be very, very important, because most times individuals see things from their own points of view, from their own frame of reference. And one of the important attributes of group therapy is helping members of the group to take on the perspectives of others, to see things from different vantage points and through other lenses. And oftentimes when individuals are able to see things from multiple lenses, the way they think, feel, and behave as it relates to situations oftentimes change. And so I oftentimes say to members of the group, if you take nothing else from the group, learn how to put yourself in other people's shoes, to see things from multiple perspectives. And when you put yourself in another person's shoes and see things through another person's lenses, it minimizes the extent to which the person becomes angry and frustrated and aggressive. And in doing so, it helps them to resolve personal issues, and it enhances the individual as well as the group. And the beautiful thing about all of this is that it transcends the group, and it positively impacts the relationships that the individual have in their personal lives as well as in their work lives. So one of the powerful attributes of group therapy is how it transcends the group context and it evolves. So consistent with stage 4, as it relates to performing, termination, cohesiveness, working through, it involves the developing of roles. There is the channeling of energy in positive ways, resolving issues. There's an increased level of disclosure, honesty, spontaneity, responsibility, and interaction among group members. There's also an increased level of interpretation, behavioral reaffirmation, intensification of feelings, sadness, anxiety, as well as dependence. But there's also the preparation for separation. So consistent with stage 5, which deals with adjourning, cohesiveness, closing, mourning, consolidation, and termination. This phase is very action-oriented. There's a deeper sense of exploration of problems. There's a greater sense of solidarity among group members as well as with the group leader. There is integration of the group process in one's personal life. So they're integrating what's learned in group into their personal ways of being and doing. There's problem resolution. There is more honesty. And then there is termination, which deals with closure. And closure occurs when the goals of the group, the goals are reached. However, sometimes there is a forced termination by virtue of the fact that the health provider or the insurance company may only pay for X number of groups. And so it might be more time specific in terms of when the group ends. But the ideal is when groups end once the goals have been achieved. So with stage 6, which deals with follow-up and evaluation, it typically occurs around 3 months post-group. It's optional, so some group members may return while others may not. It might entail a reunion or a potluck, and it involves just sharing how they have evolved or changed since the group process, any updates or relevant information. So there is a developmental process of the group by the group leader, And so what I'd like to do is just take a little bit of time talking about the developmental process of the group that is the responsibility of the group leader. So there is the definitive stage, there is the personal involvement stage, there's the group involvement stage, and enhancement and closure stage. And so along with the various stages of the group that we've talked about previously, it's important to recognize that the group leader has certain roles and responsibilities as it relates to the various stages of the group, because ultimately it's the group leader that serves to move the group through the 5 stages that we talked about. And so in understanding the 6 stages, the 6 stages that we've already talked about, it's important for the group leader to understand their role and responsibility for helping the group to evolve through the 6 stages. Because I know personally as well as professionally that if the group leader isn't able to effectively move the group through the stages, the group stymies, people drop out, and the success of the group is very limited. So what do we mean when we talk about the definitive stage of the group process, which is the responsibility of the group leader? Well, within the definitive stage, there is formative and developmental responsibilities. So as it relates to some of these formative and developmental responsibility, prior to the group getting started, group leaders come together, and if you're fortunate enough to work with a co-leader, it works even better because you don't have to think of all this stuff on your own. You have the luxury of working with someone that can help you flush out the different ideas of the group. You can process out what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, what works, what doesn't work. You have a sounding board. But if you don't, then your responsibility begins with developing the rationale for the group. Why are you doing this group? What need does it serve? What's the void that exists? So what's the rationale for the group? What's the purpose of the group? You have to decide the theoretical format of the group. For me, I am cognitive behaviorist in everything that I do. I'm also very person-centered. And so I'm always thinking about things from a cognitive behaviorist perspective, because at the end of the day, if you can't change behaviors, then you're not effective. I also believe that in order to change behaviors, you have to work on cognitions as well as affect, because it's not the antecedent, it's not the issues, but it's the way people think about them and feel about those issues that impacts their behavior. So it's not the circumstances, the way people think and feel that it impacts behaviors. So because of that, everything I do as a group therapist or as a group leader comes from a cognitive behavioral framework. Also, because I value relationship, because I know the importance that the relationship plays in any therapeutic context, I always function from a Rogerian person-centered perspective. So I believe in the person. I also believe in unconditional positive regard. I believe in being authentic. I believe in empathy. And so with all that, I really function, regardless to the context, I always function from a cognitive behaviorist person-centered perspective, because I do believe that the relationship is key. Some cognitive behaviorists, they don't believe that the relationship is key. They believe that if you focus on cognitions, affect, and behavior, you will get the behavior change that you desire. But because I am very humanistic in my thinking, I believe in relationships, I believe in that human connection, I'm very person-centered in everything that I do. It's also important to determine the logistics, the time, the place, the location, the number of members, the number of meetings. So you want to consideration to all of the logistics. What time will your group be meeting? Is that the optimal time? The place. The place is important because there are times you have to select a place to protect the confidentiality of the members. So if your office is recognized as a facility for mental illness where mental treatment is provided, you want to make sure that you have parking in the back of your facility so that through traffic doesn't recognize a participant's car parked in front. So the place is very important. Also, if you have participants that come in for group therapy and they rely on mass transit, you want to make sure that your office or the location for the groups is near a bus line. It's near the bus route. So you want to give place a very important consideration because it has a lot to do with your participants and their ability to get to the location. The number of meetings. Sometimes the number of meetings is predetermined by the insurer or the provider of services. So the insurance company may only approve 8 sessions, or they may approve 10 sessions. So whatever the case might be, you want to make sure that you consider the logistics of the group sessions based upon the resources that are available. Also, as it relates to time, I just want to back up and say, as it relates to time, most groups meet for 90 minutes. So when you have 8 to 10 people in a room, you don't accomplish much of anything in 60 minutes. So most groups meet within 90 minutes. You also want to determine whether your groups are open or closed, whether they are heterogeneous or homogeneous. So as it relates to open or closed groups, it means that you have participants that are able to come in at any time during the group process. So whether it's the first meeting, the second, third, or fifth meeting, you have group members that are constantly enrolling. The problem with open groups is that it's hard to develop the cohesiveness that you seek in group, and it takes longer when you constantly have members rolling in on an ongoing basis, because there's constantly the issue of trust when you have new people that are coming to the group. There's also issues related to cohesiveness when your groups are open and members are constantly coming in and the members don't know each other and they have to be able to trust each other to divulge personal confidential information. So while open groups have the benefit of always meeting the needs of persons whereby they can constantly enrolled, there are some problematic issues associated with open groups. And so you have to decide whether or not you want to compromise issues related to trust and boundaries, cohesiveness, which is constantly challenged when members are constantly able to enter into the group process. I also mentioned heterogeneous versus homogeneous groups. There are times when you have to ask yourself whether or not you want your groups to be consistent of only one kind of participant, like maybe gender separate or gender mixed gendered groups. So for example, if one has a group for survivors of childhood sexual abuse, adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, would you have both male and female survivors of childhood sexual abuse? In all likelihood, you wouldn't. And because that's an area that I provide treatment, I would say that it wouldn't be ideal to have a heterogeneous group for survivors of trauma or childhood sexual abuse, because what it means is that females in the group may have a reaction to having males in the group, or males that have been sexually abused by females may have an issue with females being present in the group. So you have to clearly and carefully consider who are the group members that will be able to participate, whether you want open versus closed groups, whether you want the groups to be homogeneous or heterogeneous. You want to give thought to the time of the group, as well as taking into consideration that groups are typically 90 minutes, and the number of meetings. And based upon the number of meetings, it dictates what amount of information you have to cover in the number of groups that are prescribed. There are also the recruitment of members in the definitive stage of the group process. So you want to advertise, and typically you advertise through flyers. You might advertise through by word of mouth. You might advertise through the radio, but you have to decide how you want to recruit your members. Once you've recruited members, every person that contacts you about participating in the group will not be ideal for the group. So as such, you have to screen your members. You have to make sure that they are appropriate for the goals of the group, for the intentions of the group. Sometimes you find that persons might meet the goals of the group, but because their emotional state is such that they're still grieving, certain issues, they might be best suited for individual therapy. And then when they become more emotionally stable, then they might be ideal for a group context. So screening your members is very important because it can help you to minimize issues that could be problematic later on. And it also helps you to get a group that would be easier to develop a sense of relationship, connectedness, and of cohesiveness. So always be mindful of the importance of the screening process, and make sure members understand the purpose of the group and how groups function. Some persons aren't receptive to disclosing to others. It might be against their cultural values. So if you have persons that are interested in the group that might be more willing to be observers than actually participants in disclosing in the group, then they wouldn't be ideal for the group process. Or they may not be ideal for the kind of group that you're organizing. So they might be better for a psychoeducational group, but they may not be good for a process-related group where it's a lot of sharing of personal thoughts, feelings, and emotions, the more psychotherapy kinds of groups. And we'll talk about groups in subsequent slides. You also want to carefully select your leader or co-leader. You want to make sure that you have someone who brings certain interests, talents, temperaments to the group process. The last thing you want is to select a group leader that you don't have a good interpersonal relationship or interpersonal communication style with. So you want to carefully select the leader or co-leaders for the group process. So these are some of the major issues related to the definitive stage of the group process that the group leader must be mindful of. We also want to talk about member inclusion. You want to you want to ensure that the individual have a defined purpose for being in the group, and that their individually defined purpose for the group is consistent for the goals of the group. You want to make sure that among the group leaders that there is a personal commitment for involvement. You want to make sure that they understand the extent of sharing and disclosing that exists in the group context. You want to answer any personal questions that the participants have, but you also want to answer information regarding personal questioning as it relates to, will the group help? Does the person fit for the group? Will they fit in? Can they trust the group leader as well as group members? And how much do they might have to share? And so group members potential members for the group also have questions that they would like to have answered so that they too can determine whether they perceive themselves to be right for the group. So it's not only the group leader that is interviewing or screening the potential uh, group members, but it's also the potential members making decisions about whether or not they are best suited for the group. Because once they learn of what is expected in a group and what is required in terms of sharing and processing and challenging and confrontation, not only from the group member but from each other, participants may decide, you know what, I don't think this is right for me. I don't think I'm interested. I don't think this is a good fit. And when they determine that they're not a good fit, or if the group leader decides that potential members are not a good fit, always be mindful that you must refer the participants to other resources. Always be mindful that you want to properly refer persons to other resources, because there is a reason why they contacted you for services. And if you're not the best fit, I do believe that you have a responsibility to refer people that are seeking help to other resources that might be best suited for them. So the next stage that is required for the group leader in the group development process has to do with the personal involvement stage. And in the personal involvement stage, there is member-to-member interaction. So not only is there the interaction between the group leader and the group members, there is a relationship or sense of interaction that exists between the members of the group. There is sharing of personal information. There is the encouraging in confrontation and as well as power struggles. There is both action, reaction, and interaction among the members. There's an opportunity to try out behaviors. So sometimes the therapist or the group leader might role play situations with the group members, or you might facilitate the members role playing situations with each other. There's the opportunity to affirm or deny perceptions of self as well as others. And so you're constantly aware of different opportunities to help your participants to learn, grow, become enlightened. There's always feedback that is shared among the members as well as with the group leader to the members. And it also begins the self-evaluative process. So there's the personal involvement stage that exists where the therapy actually begins, but it's the interactions that takes place between the members of the group as well as the group leader. So then there's the group involvement stage. And in the group involvement stage, there's self-evaluation as well as self-assessment of behaviors, attitudes, values, methods of communicating. You're meeting the personal goals of the members as well as the members' goals. And so you're mindful within the group, what are the goals of the members? What are the goals of the group? And you're constantly looking for ways of helping the members of the group as well as the individuals within the group to obtain their goals. And you are mindful of conflict, but you want to make sure you go from conflict and confrontation to cooperation and cohesiveness. So throughout this process, you're always in a process of acting, interacting, and reacting to issues that are discussed, but you're in a process of minimizing conflict and confrontation and increasing the level of cooperation and cohesiveness. And like I said, before, some of these issues are fluid. It might be fluid within the group, and it is certainly fluid when the group has members that are able to enter into the group at various points in time, so that if it's an open group, your issues related to conflict, confrontation is more pronounced than if it's a closed group. It's much easier to evolve from conflict and confrontation to cooperation and cohesiveness if your group is closed. But you find that issues are far more fluid if the group process is that of a closed group versus an open group. So enhancement and closure stage of the group process is also very important. So members evaluate the group process. It's always important to ask the members, what do they think of the process? What are they getting out of it? What would they like that they're not receiving? So as the group leader, you are mindful of ways of enhancing the group, as well as moving the group toward the stages of closure. And so in the evaluative process, you're asking members their opinion, but also as a group leader, at every stage of the group process, you're evaluating the group and making adjustments, not just waiting to the end to do the summative evaluation, but along the way, you are also evaluating the effectiveness of the group and the group members and ways of getting people more engaged and meeting their individual as well as the group goals. So you are reinforcing changes within the group context. There is a commitment to continued self-analysis and growth. So you are always wanting to make sure that members of the group are bought in, that they are engaged in the process, that they are participating in self-awareness, self-analysis, self-growth, that they are committed. You are wanting to pay attention to the extent to which members are sharing significant information within the group. You want to ensure that the feedback is provided not only from members of the group, but also from the group leader. So you're constantly reinforcing and affirming and confirming information with the group member. So as you can see, there is a lot that goes on to the group context, and a lot that the group leader must be mindful of in the group process. And so I find groups to be a very enjoyable experience. It's always wonderful to work with groups as they evolve through the process. I will acknowledge, even for myself, that it is somewhat anxiety provoking when groups first begin, because given the newness of the group, members are not there's no cohesiveness, there's no sense of relationship, either with myself or with others. So it's a lot more work at the beginning, but the joy that comes as the groups evolve, it is very evident. And so I oftentimes find that I have a lot of fun in groups, especially when they matriculate through the various stages. It's a lot of fun. And it's very affirming to sit back and watch how they rely upon the group leaders less and on each other's more. And so basically you just serve as the leader that helps them to stay within certain boundaries. You help them to continue to grow and process and address issues. So that is it for our discussion on the group process. We've talked a lot about important areas associated with the stages of development, not only as it relates from a general context by other researchers, but also from Yalom, who is our godfather of group therapy in the United States. So I hope you have found this information important and interesting, and I encourage you to think about ways of positively impacting the group process given your own personal style of communicating and your chosen therapeutic framework of interest. So thank you for your time and attention, and I hope that you found this lecture beneficial.